Welcome to Haverchat, a leadership podcast where we explore the principles, stories, and people that shape great leadership. I'm your host, Todd Wiesenberg, the Chief Culture Officer at Haverkamp Group, and today we're going to kick things off with a meaningful conversation about influence. Joining us is Brent Haverkamp, the founder and owner for Haverkamp Group. Brent, let's start with a question I'm going to be asking every guest on Haverchat, and that is this: how do you define leadership?
Yeah, Todd, as I think about leadership, I think about influencing and motivating and guiding a group of people towards a goal. And, you know, if I'm going to think about what sort of qualities are involved with that, I think about three things. And they all start with a C. And so, you know, it's character, competence, and commitment are the three things that I think about that leaders, not all of our leaders have that, but I think we should strive towards that. Okay,
let's unpack those three C's. So define the first one, character. What does that look like in a leader, character?
So when I think about character, I think, okay, does a leader have the type of character that you want to emulate? And so, you know, is that the type of person that I want to follow?
Okay. And then your second C was competency?
Yeah.
Okay. Unpack competency.
Yeah. So I think people want to know that your leader knows what they're talking about, and they've been there before, or they know the path to take. And so they want to make sure your leader is competent.
So would you say that's a combination of like head knowledge as well as just life experience, or is it a blend of that?
It can be a lot of things. You know, for me, it was most of the jobs in our company, I've done them before. Mm-hmm. And so there's some things that I can lean on. You know, when I speak into an issue, some people are just natural leaders and they have a competence that they know how to lead in front of people. But yeah, so I think you can get that in a couple of different ways. But I think, you know, people want to know that your leader knows what they're talking about.
Okay. And then your third and final C was commitment.
Yeah, commitment.
All right. Again, explain what that looks like.
Yeah. So I think it's hard to ask people to go either where you haven't been or where you're not willing to go. And so it's hard to motivate people if they don't know that you're committed to a goal, it's really hard for them to get there as well. So yeah, I think those three things are really important.
Leadership. This is kind of an age-old question and kind of going off script here a little bit on you, Brent, but is leadership something that can be taught, or is it just inherent?
Yeah, for me, it was, I think, very much taught. You know, I don't think I was very much of an inherent leader, Todd.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. So when did you recognize, though, that you were a leader? Was there a moment in time that kind of light bulb went off and you recognized yourself as a leader?
Yeah. So, you know, kind of like what we talked about before, I think some people are born leaders. Mm-hmm. You know, they have a quality that makes people want to follow them. You know, if you kind of think in high school, there's just certain people that kind of had, I don't know, maybe we'll call it. You know, they had it, and then people wanted to follow them. I was not that. Okay. And so I had none of those qualities that, you know, that people naturally gravitated towards me. And so as I really thought about this leadership thing, for me, it was finding something that perhaps I saw a little more clearly than a lot of people. And perhaps I was able to see the future of it better, and I was passionate about it. I was committed towards it. And then it was then doing that thing and replicating it then people started to be attracted to it because they saw the success in it. They saw I was committed to it. They saw I understood it. And they said, oh, I'll follow you in that. So, yeah.
You are a leader in lots of different contexts. Obviously here at Haverkamp Group, it bears your name, but you're also seen as a leader in the community. You're seen as a leader in the church. How do those all kind of blend together? How does one play off of the other, if you will?
Yeah. Like we talked about before, I think it was having some success in the real estate world, perhaps being able to see the future a little more clearly than others could see it. And then that success kind of bred confidence within me. And once I had that confidence, then that started to play out in other areas of my life. And, once you started to hire people inside of your business and have success at that, well, then when your church wanted to hire some people, they might come to you and say, hey, how do I do that? Once you started to manage an entity with some complexity and some budget and some success, then in that process, you would go and people would start to ask you about how you would go about doing those sorts of things. And so I think one of the things I really learned is how important confidence is to leadership. And lots of times when you think about confidence, you kind of think of it something you have or you don't have, but I really think it's something that you can exercise and something that you can grow. And once I sort of learned that, then that became something that I wanted to exercise and I wanted to grow. Because if you're not a natural leader, then you look to things like that you can build on, because in my case, I was so passionate about something that that's what caused me to want to be a leader.
Okay. Love the word exercise there, and I wrote that down here. If you could, what does it look like today? I mean, you've been leading for a long time. What does it look like still to exercise leadership? I mean, I think of physical exercise, you got to keep doing it over and over again. So what does it look like for Brent Haverkamp today compared to what it looked like 30 years ago?
Yeah. I think it's really important to stay grounded. And I think perhaps we're going to talk about, maybe mistakes and successes. Right. And I think it's really important to remember both of those. And so, a failure can be a success if you learn something from it. But then you want to make sure you don't repeat that in the future. And then successes, you can learn from those as well. But sometimes we forget, that successes won't always be successful in the future. And so I think remembering the past in a way that you can stay grounded. And for me, I have a lot of people that have been in my life for a long period of time. And, before I ever was a leader or before I ever was successful, and, talking to those people will keep you grounded because they remember you, without any of the trappings of success. So, yeah.
Let's keep going off of people in your life. And who were some of the earliest influencers in your life that helped shape you to being a leader? Yeah. Earliest influences,
I think first and foremost about my dad. And Dad was a really hard worker. He, we've kind of talked about this before, but he immigrated to this country when he was in his early 20s, couldn't speak the language. And so he didn't have a lot of head starts, in his life, but what he always had was commitment, and he would always finish a job no matter what it took. And so I really think I learned a lot of lessons early on about, hey, when you don't have all the gifts that others might, well, you can still be successful as long as you keep your head down, you finish a job, show up early, stay late, and all those types of lessons that I learned from my dad. And the second one is actually my high school basketball coach. And so Jim Ecoff was a very successful coach. And my senior year of high school, we won a state championship. And I think what's interesting about that is really there were no stars on that team. I don't think a lot of people expected us to have that much success. But what he was able to do was take a group of guys, instill a vision and a belief, and cause us to work together better than most. And that process of each one of us kind of exercising our gifts and working together caused us a lot of success. And so I always kind of reflect back on that process that he went to. And so, you know, we were his first state championship team. And I think he learned a lot, you know, in that process. But he went on to be very successful, one of the most successful high school basketball coaches in Iowa. And so I think about those two people that had a lot of influence on my early success. Yeah.
All right. Well, then let's fast forward just a little bit and let's talk about your early part of your career. You know, post-graduation, job. As you start off, who were some people that came alongside you then that were maybe really good influences as far as showing you what leadership looked like and challenged you? Yeah.
I really think of three people, friends early on that I learned a lot of lessons from. And, you know, the first one was somebody we both know, and Dixon Jensen.
Right.
And, you know, we worked together early on. He was a builder for me. And I think the lesson I learned from Dixon was he had an uncanny sense of confidence about what he was doing. And, you know, if he said it in a way that everyone around him would believe it, whether or not it was true or not. But I saw how important that idea of, you know, confidence was. And, you know, this kind of will go back to these 3 C's. And so he just had this confidence about him. The second one is an old friend, Troy Nesbitt. And, you know, I think the lesson that I learned from Troy is this character one. And so success without character, you know, doesn't really have a lot of meaning. And, you know, so just really helped me stay grounded. And you see a lot of leaders that kind of go into left field or right field, but he really kind of kept me centered. And then the third one is Paul Wilkin, you know, who's with us today. And boy, the thing that I learned about Paul is he has a competence about him. And so he and I are very different, and we think about, but we are always willing to challenge each other around ideas. And so Paul, in so many ways, has made me, you know, challenge my thinking, help me make me better as time moves on. So,
Brent, as parents and grandparent, I'm sure you've used this phrase. You know, you pick your friends, you pick your future. You obviously picked some really good friends, and they really helped you to being the man that you are today. We're going to shift from people to let's talk about experiences.
Yeah.
Okay. Just events that have happened over your lifetime, some for the good, maybe some not for the good. But actually, let's start with something that was maybe not so good, a negative, a failure. You know, what was something that happened in your career that really shaped you to being, again, the leader you are today?
Yeah. You know, the the 2006, 7, 8 period was a very difficult time for our business. The great, they call it the Great Financial Recession. What do they call that? But anyway, kind of the Great Recession.
Right.
And, a whole convergence of things happened at the same time. Paul and I were growing a business called Retail Management Group that we probably grew more quickly than we should have. And we had a variety of challenges there. And once the banks stopped lending, we were having trouble paying our bills. And so I think that was probably the greatest challenge of our business career. And, lessons in that, I think I had some successes early on in real estate. And because of those successes, I really thought I could achieve a lot of things way more quickly than I should have. And so we expanded, too quickly. We took on a lot of debt. And so there was tremendous challenges during that 2 to 3 year period. And, once you're in kind of a existential crisis, where you're wondering, are we going to continue to exist like this? I had 2 friends go bankrupt, in that time period. And so that thought was always present in the back of my mind. And so those years were really challenging years, Todd. Yeah.
Okay, so they're really challenging years. You learned some lessons. Can you think of any real particular lessons that you learned that just that you could clearly articulate a moment or a certain principle, maybe?
Yeah. I would talk about sometimes success that comes early, like I had in real estate. What's the best way that I want to say this? I thought I would be successful at everything that I did.
Gotcha.
And that didn't happen. And so it was humbling to know, just because you were successful in this doesn't mean that you'll be successful in everything. And I think that is a really good lesson for all of us, particularly leaders, that you want to take your past successes and be measured in how you think about those, because they may or may not translate to the future.
Okay. So you came out on the other side of that time period, and you basically said, real estate's my thing.
Yeah.
And talk about the lessons and then how you grew.
So I think that time period is really my greatest failure and perhaps my greatest success at the same time. And so really during the depth of that crisis, as we were trying to figure out how to survive, Paul and I got together and he says, you need to sell it. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, you got to sell your real estate and see if we can fix the problems that we made. And so we went ahead and we sold about 3/4 of our portfolio. And it was a really hard decision to make because the real estate was cash flowing and it was doing well. And so, we showed up to work every day. We did the best we could. We were honest, with all of those. And then we made a hard decision. And then eventually that paid off. And, in retrospect, I think if we hadn't made that hard decision, perhaps I would have followed, 2 of my friends into bankruptcy because, as that lending crisis got worse and worse, we found ourselves in a really fortunate position for selling a lot of our real estate at a good time while we still could. And we ended up on the other side really being in a position that we could expand where a lot of people couldn't. And so that period from 2009-10 through 2013-14 was probably the period of greatest growth for Haverchamp Group that we've seen. And so it's really interesting. I think as people look to challenges, I think a lot of us, we want to shirk away from them. But if we can learn to embrace it, figure out how to work through it, and then on the other side, think about the lessons. What lessons are there? And, during that period, I think about it so often because we came so close to failure, but it turned into really our greatest success ever. And so it's just a really interesting idea. If you don't learn from a crisis, you probably wasted that crisis. And so that would be, for all those that are going through a problem, I don't care if it's with business or family or whatever it is. So how can you get through it, but what can you learn from it? I think is so important, Todd.
I had to write that down. That was a nugget right there. If you don't learn from a crisis, you've wasted it. You've wasted that opportunity.
You wasted that opportunity. I think so often we want to get out of it. We want to forget about it. We want to put it in the past. And really, we need to learn from our failures. We need to learn from our problems. And if we don't, I don't think you're going to fully develop as a leader.
Embrace that. Yeah. I'm actually going to go off script here again, Brent, and I'm going to add another C to your list of leadership qualities, and that is caring. The reason I say that is because as you were telling the story about, selling 3/4 of your portfolio at that time, I had just really started working for you. I was just a couple years of having my tenure with you. And I don't know if you remember this or not. Obviously, it's very much a core memory for me. But after you had sold the portfolio out west, I had an opportunity. Those buyers asked if I would come join their team.
I remember.
You remember this, yeah. And you came over to our house. You sat down with Kendra and myself, and we just had a conversation. And you just kept saying, Todd, I don't know what the future looks like, but all I can tell you is I like to buy and sell real estate. Yeah. But just the fact that you came over, to have that conversation demonstrated that other C, I'll say, of caring. And that impacted me. And obviously it has shaped me to want to be, that kind of leader who is willing to, meet with people and talk about what's going on in their lives.
I knew that was a critical moment because the job that you had signed up for, was a lot smaller than it was. And what I wanted to do is just sit down and say, hey, I can't guarantee it. I don't know for sure, but I think I see the future a little bit more clearly than most. And here's what I see, Todd, and I'd love you to be a part of it. Right. And that's kind of that, attributes of a leader that I talked about.
Absolutely.
I didn't have that natural charisma, but I said, hey, the experience I have, my competence, and you knew the character that I had. And so I was going to tell you the truth.
Absolutely.
And you knew the commitment that I had.
Absolutely.
And so I said, so can you follow me? Because I knew I didn't want to lose you. But I also knew that you had to have the opportunity to make your own choice.
Right.
Because I wasn't sure.
Right.
And that's so often what leaders have to do is maybe you're 60-40 or 70-30 or whatever it is, but leaders have to choose. They have to make a decision.
Right.
And so then I said, okay, this is what I'm going to tell Todd, and maybe he'll follow, maybe he won't follow, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Yeah. So, yeah.
I was interviewed by one of our leadership and training members, and one of the questions that came up, they said, Todd, what's the greatest risk you ever took? And I said, my greatest risk was staying. If you think about it, because at that time, this other group was dangling a very nice carrot out there, from a from a perspective of, hey, if this is the trajectory that a person in my profession would want to go, this really made sense. But the risk was actually staying, and I'm so glad I did, because here we are today, and I get to sit down and interview you. So it's a very wonderful memory.
So just I believe that was 2007.
Correct.
And so that was 18 years ago, Todd.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for going down memory lane there with me. So how have your leadership qualities evolved over time? Are there things that are more important today than what they were, again, in the past?
Yeah. I took a backpacking trip about a month or two ago. And at night, kind of around the fire, sometimes we kind of ask probing questions. And my question was, what's something that you used to care a lot about, but don't care as much about anymore? And for me, my answer was achievement. And so I used to care an awful lot about achieving and accomplishing. And that's what would drive me. And today, as my buddy Troy and I, we talk a lot about the quarters of our life. And so I'm almost done with my third quarter of my life. So we kind of break it. First quarter is to 20, second quarter is to 40, third quarter is to 60. And I'm knocking on that door.
Right.
And then the fourth quarter is 60 to 80
Okay.
on. And so I'm knocking on the door of the fourth quarter. I'm finishing up the third quarter of my life. And I'm a lot more concerned about, I'm going to call it contributing, passing things on, than I am about achieving. And so that's probably the biggest change that I made is leadership for me, kind of in my second quarter and in the beginning of my third quarter was a lot about accomplishment. And so I'm trying to figure out how to kind of change that. And okay, how do I influence and how do I contribute and how do I make the team better? And those aren't natural for me, Todd. And so, but I'm working on making that shift as I enter the fourth quarter. Okay,
so let's fast forward a little bit. Fourth quarter, I don't know where you're at in the fourth quarter, but you're stepping away. And as people talk about Brent Haverkamp, what are some things you would hope that they would say about you as they described your leadership? What would that sound like?
Yeah.
What would you want that to sound like?
So if all they talked about were achievements, what we accomplished, then I think we missed it. And I hope they talk about how they became a better person, how their family is enhanced, about how they live this life a little bit better way. And so that's what I hope that they would talk about. So often, at least it was for me, it's so easy to talk about, hey, this is what we want to do. And I want the fourth quarter, at least for me, to be a little bit more about this is who I am, or this is how I'm being instead of doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's pretend you had a young emerging leader in our organization sitting down with you today, and they wanted to, get some advice from you. They're just beginning their journey. What kind of advice would you give them as they begin their leadership journey?
Yeah, and just I would give them this advice simply because this is the way it was for me. Focus more on those three things that I talked about, particularly the competence one. instead of leadership. I see so many young people wanting to be leaders
Right.
before they develop the character and the competence and the commitment. And those three things precede leadership. And so I would say, hey, get really good at something and people will want to follow you. Don't focus on being a leader. Focus on being really competent at your job. Focus on your character and focus on your commitment. And that, at least it was that way for me, Todd. Those things became attractional to people.
Who are some people you're trying to influence today?
Children and grandchildren. And maybe a better way to say that is the next generation.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think about the next generation of leadership here at Haverchamp. I think about the next generation in my family, children and grandchildren. And in the church world, I think about the next generation that we're trying to reach through the SALT network by planting churches. And so as, it's kind of that whole fourth quarter thing. It's, okay, what can I pass on? And instead of what can I do?
Anything left unsaid about leadership as we sit here for a moment and start to wrap things up? Anything left unsaid that you wish you would have said regarding leadership? Maybe it's somebody that influenced, maybe it's a moment in time. It's just anything as you sit here and reflect about leadership that you wish you would have had a chance to say. Now's your time.
I haven't talked about my wife very much. And, my wife is a truth speaker. And by that, I mean, she'll she'll rarely tell me what I want to hear, but she'll tell me the truth about a situation. And I think we all need truth speakers in our lives, particularly leaders. And I have several of those. My wife is one of those. Paul, I think, is another one of those. Troy is another one of those. Oftentimes, I think leaders will put themselves in a situation where it's almost an echo chamber, where they put people in their lives that tell them what they want to hear. And I think that's a really dangerous position for a leader because, like we talked about earlier, it causes us to go in the left field or the right field. But to stay centered, people need to tell the truth about, hey, you really didn't do that very well. Or, I really think you hurt that person's feelings. Or, you were pretty arrogant in that situation. And in order to grow, we got to get correction in our lives. And so I think it's really important to put ourselves in environments where we can get correction.
How do you find those truth seekers? I mean, obviously,
I married one.
You married one, so that helps.
But
to other leaders out there, let's say you're now talking to somebody who is a seasoned leader, and they're thinking to themselves right now, man, I don't know if I have that type of person in my life, that truth seeker. How do they find them? What would you tell them?
Boy, I think when we hire, and the people we spend time with, I would challenge them and say, hey, look at your hiring decisions. And for me, it's a lot about longevity. It's hard to get one of those later in life. I think it's a lot easier to get them early in life. And so I guess the challenge would be find them early and hang on to them. But I do think it's more challenging later in life to find those, but you might have to seek those people out, and you may not be attracted to them. But I would say realize how valuable they are.
That's rich. That was rich. Well, Brent, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and experience with us today. Really appreciate it. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on Haverchat, a leadership podcast. We hope that you found today's conversations inspirational as you remember those leaders who have helped shape you. And remember that you are also an influence on others. Be sure to follow us on Haverchat as we have more meaningful conversations with leaders who are making a difference every day. Until next time, keep leading with purpose.